Good evening, everybody. Karibuni sana to Msingi Talks. And today, I'm very excited to be sharing this conversation with my friends. And I'll give them a few minutes to each introduce themselves. We'll start with Leslie. Let's go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. My name is Leslie, although many people call me Mueni nowadays, so I'm good with that. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 3, and I live in Moore Hills. And I've enjoyed these conversations, watching them, commenting, cheerleading, but now I'm here. I'm so scared, but I'm just really honored to be here. Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Karibu sana. And Moses Kimani.
Hey everybody, my name is Moses Kimani. I'm known to many as Kim or Pastor Kim, depending on where we are met. I am a Christ disciple. I'm passionate about organic discipleship that results in making disciples who make other disciples. I also serve as the Africa coordinator and the Kenya regional leader for United Adoration. It's a mission that is dedicated to helping people and encouraging churches to write their own songs and to lift them up to God in worship. This is an exciting conversation for me to be in, and thank you so much for inviting me. I know we will have fun together.
Mm-hmm.
I am muted. I keep muting myself. That's what I've realized in these conversations. I'm always muting myself. Richie, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's good to be back again. My name is Richard. Husband, father. And yeah, today maybe focus more on that I'm a worship leader as well. I've led worship for a number of years, and I'm excited again to be part of this conversation. Look forward to what comes out today. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's my tab. Thank you. And my name is Carol Nganga. I'm the founder and director of Msingi Trust. And Msingi Trust, we are a movement that tries to connect the worlds of faith, social justice, and advocacy. And I'm honored to have hosted these conversations. So far, if you've not been able to catch our conversations, please do so. We did one on faith and feminism and gender equality. We did one on the songs we sing last week. And why am I forgetting the other last one? Who can remember the other last one? It has escaped my mind. But we do host these conversations. They are on the Facebook page, and I'd like to play a video that shows who we are and what we are about. So give me a minute as I set that up. I really like today. I can't find the video, but we can play it at the end to share who we are about. That's okay. But our moderator that for this conversation might join us a bit in the middle because he's caught up in traffic. But we'll have the conversations and go with it as we go. But I'd like to ask my friends here. So what was your first memory of a song you sang or a song you heard, and what stood out for you about that song? Can start with Leslie. Anybody can go, actually.
Okay. Let's see. I grew up on Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, DC Talk, and Stephen Curtis Chapman, and just a lot of Christian music because I was brought up in theological institutions. My parents, they lecture, so just surrounded by a lot of just Christian music. There's one interesting thing I can share is that recently I unearthed one of my Stephen Curtis Chapman CDs, and I was listening to it because I thought it was these songs, I grew up on them, let my kids experience them, and so, I played this CD and they liked it, and I was so excited because this is music that I used to like worship to. Then there's this song called Burn the Ships. So it starts playing. Then Richard, my husband, looks at me and he's like, what's that song about? So I'm like, Kwani, what is it? So I begin to think about it. Now, the song is talking about burn the ships, and it uses a historical event to explain our faith and how we should not look back on where we've come from, our former life, but we should instead move forward in faith and trust that the one who brought us here will be with us. But that historical event that it uses to explain that is the Spanish conquest of Mexico, because the first line in that song is, do I remember it? Cortez.
The fall of, something, 1855.
in the spring of 1519. I mean, that song is in my head. I've been listening to it since I was a child. In the spring of 1519, Spanish fleet set sail, and Cortez told his sailors, this mission must not fail. And then now it moves from there to now, relating it to our faith. So literally, like, I think it was a month ago when we listened to this song, and I was like, oh snap. As in, I've been singing this song, but it's based on the Spanish conquest, on conquering Yani. I was just like, what? Because basically he told his sailors they had no choice. You either have to conquer these people or you die. I was like, wow. So,
wow. We need, I think,
I'm unpacking a lot of those songs now,
Yeah, wow. Context.
Absolutely, yeah.
And who's the writer of the songs?
Yep.
Thank you, Leslie. Moses?
It's interesting, as I was listening to Leslie share, I could reconnect with many memories. Interestingly, though, that's not entirely what I grew up on. I discovered that at some point. My earliest memories are really of, I grew up as a sundowner kid. Those of us who would listen to the Voice of Kenya radio, and it was the general service, the English service. So I grew up on Sundowner, on lunchtime music, and another music show that used to be called Yours for the Asking. I think it still runs till this day. And the earliest memory for me for a specific song would be Sail On by Commodores. The crazy, crispy voice of Lionel Richie. His voice, by the way, till this day strikes a very deep chord in me. And maybe that's because, from as early as I can remember, his voice would be playing on in my home. So that's more the kind of thing that came to mind. With regard to the kind of experiences some of that brought, I think I really liked that song because for some reason I would listen to part of the song, then run off from the room, like the living room, and go hide myself in my room and get into bed in the darkness and imagine no one else is in there, then pick up the part of the tune that I'd listened to, and then try and create my own. So basically, innovation came kind of easy for me even as a child. So I would take a tune that is already known and then kind of try and develop my own from there. Later is when I'll discover that, you know, that's part of how we write good music. You start with something that kind of exists and then take that trail and create your own further on down the road. So I enjoyed that.
Wow. Thank you, Moses. Richie?
Yeah, I think my earliest memories of singing and songs was our family. We used to have like a, a family singing group. I don't know how many. I think a lot of Kenyan families used to have a singing group. So when you go to visit other families, there's always that kind of session where every family kind of does a number. Call it a number. So I remember my dad used to play the guitar a little, and that's kind of where I took interest also and started to learn. But we used to sing this song, used to be burdens are lifted.
At Calvary.
Yes, Calvary. So yeah, I think that would be kind of where my love for singing came from just from the home. And yeah, and then I grew up with the Alvin Slaughters and the Ron Kenolis and all that. And I kind of have an ear for music. Like I can just hear from a distance, just kind of like, I don't know, a bass line or a tune, and I'll be like, that's that song. You know, it just comes back to my mind. So so yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Let me tell you, that gift is a gift I have never been given ever. Ever. All right. So thank you, guys. You realize that growing up, your experiences, what we first hear, what we listen to in the home, in families, all of that play a huge role in the songs that we sing and the songs that create our memories. So maybe many of us are asking, why did we need to do the songs we sing part 2? Because we spent almost an hour and a half last month speaking on tackling this title, but feedback from most of you said that we do need to discuss the how, and hopefully this is what we are going to engage ourselves with tonight. I think we were here last. Some of us, Moses was not part of this conversation. Leslie wasn't, but you've listened to what we talked about last week. Is there something from the last month conversation that stood out for you? And maybe for you, Richie, when you look back at what was said, is there a particular thing that stood out for you that you'd like to raise up now, just as a reminder of what we spoke about last month? It's not an exam. You can say, I can't remember, and it's okay.
I mean, wow. Yeah, you know, if you think about our conversations and where we're going, you know, someone could ask the question, like what's really wrong with the songs that we sang in church, I don't know, before the pandemic, for instance, last time you were in church, you know, because, I mean, we lifted our hands and we worshipped and we sang out loud, and we know the lyrics and we know the songs, you know. And so if guys are saying that our worship is kind of not balanced, or we're not singing a complete song, you know, like what are people really referring to? So I had a few moments to reflect on that, and that the way I would respond to the question, you know, that a question like, what is wrong with our songs? I think I would say it's our theology. Our theology is it doesn't have the correct balance or posture that allows us to worship God in his fullness, yeah. And you know, Psalm 89:14 talks about righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne, yeah. And the way I think we've always thought about that is that you have righteousness on one hand and you have justice on the other hand, yeah. And the posture I think that the church has taken for a long time is you know, we angle ourselves more towards righteousness, yeah. We look at those two, you know, attributes as two separate things, you know, on kind of two opposing sides, yeah. So we angle ourselves towards righteousness, and we kind of turn our back slightly towards justice, because justice has been given so many connotations by the world that it's become ungodly, or it's become something we shouldn't pursue as believers, yeah. And the way I think we should look at it is that righteousness is in harmony with justice. So it's righteousness and justice. You get are the foundations of God's throne. And we cannot worship God in his fullness and in his true self if we're just focusing on one of the attributes. We have to look at it as a harmony, as that he is one. You get. And so then even you look at the Psalms, and you know, many times we want to categorize the Psalms and say, oh, these are psalms of lament, and these are psalms of praise. But I think once you start to see God in this fullness, yeah, you realize that the psalm is just one book, it's just one song. You get, because David was able to take righteousness and put it in harmony with justice, you get. And so it wasn't two things that were fighting or competing against each other, but it was that's the true nature and the complete nature of who God is. So what has to change for our songs to reflect this nature? It's our theology. Because our theology shapes our songs and our worship. And our songs also shape our theology, yeah? And that's why God in Amos, you know, he starts by saying, I'm tired of your religious festivals. But somewhere down the line he says, when is the last time you sang to me? So it's all kind of, you know, it feeds into each other and feeds off of each other. So yeah, I think that's where we really have to do the work, is in how do we reimagine Christianity that embodies that harmony between righteousness and justice, yeah. Then our songs will be fine, yeah.
Our songs will be complete. And for those who are new to Msingi, Msingi's name comes from Psalms 89:14, that speaks about righteousness and justice is the foundation of God's throne. And how we share is that we've built so much on the one side of the God's kingdom, which is righteousness, and we've built also a shaky ground on that end, but we've really built nothing on the side of justice. And so this Msingi's aim is to dwell on the arm of justice so that we can at least have a semblance of balance. Moses, anything that you got from the conversation last month?
Yeah, I was struck by how glaringly the message came through that, you know, whilst we've been doing lots of celebratory songs, and there's nothing wrong with celebratory songs per se, that they have been the only staple of our music in the church, and that is where the problem is. Let me see if I can phrase this in my own words. If I'm celebrating externally, but I'm not doing so internally, if I'm sorrowing inside, but because of the Sunday church culture, you know, the Sunday smile, the Sunday face, the Sunday best, I show up in church and everything is supposed to look good on the outside, but I'm really sorrowing inside. And so I'm celebrating it externally, but I'm really sorrowing inside. Then really what's going on there is pretense.
Mm.
And that for me is very, very, very sad, because if I'm supposed to bring my true self before the Lord, but I'm bringing a mask. God doesn't know how to deal with masks. He requires that I take that mask off. Then we can have a conversation. Then he can meet me where I'm at, because he doesn't deal with lies, and masks are lies. So I especially liked that. And basically what that comes down to is we need songs of lament and songs of protest. They are part of who we are as human beings. We want to be able to sing about those songs even as we invite God into those spaces, because he needs to step into those too. Yeah.
Yeah. The complete and brave songs. I think for me, last month. It feels like it's last week because the conversation is so fresh. But it was about singing complete and brave songs. So, Leslie, anything that comes up for you? No? Sawa. Dannish Karibu. Dannish is here. But before I hand over to him, I want to ask you, as songwriters, when did you transition, or how did you come to the place of knowing that you need to write different songs? Leslie, you can, and that can also tell us, in that you can tell us what you've done in the realm of songwriting, in the realm of praise and worship. But what was that moment that you knew that something has to change, that there's something that's not Ingi and Nang entering each other in our slang?
I get it. I I took a class with Curtis Reed called Hip Hop and the Bible. I think it was about 2 or so years ago. And I think that class shook everything that I thought I knew about God, about Jesus, about my faith. I mean, everything. Just a literal just shaking for what? Wow. Everything I had, grown up, hearing and learning about God was fake or untrue. Just that it was just so much deeper than I'd ever been willing to go. And so I obviously cannot summarize the class here, but one of the things that we talked about was Jesus. And I think Curtis did this over about 2 classes. And I was reintroduced to the real Jesus, of Nazareth. And from that, that set in motion the play that Richie mentioned. I think it was the last time you had this conversation, and it was reimagining Christmas without the lights. So that was now just sort of just wow, this, I don't know how else to use all this information, all this, just, except to put together this play. And it was, and then also just a culmination of all the conversations that we've been having also, just being in this space and hearing people ask questions, that God is big enough for our questions, and being free to interact with people who are, just willing to, I don't know what else to say, but that has been really powerful for me.
And thank you, Leslie, because I remember, I don't know if you remember this, you remember me crying all through your play.
Yes, and I was wondering, hey.
Yes,
she's got issues.
This one, we'll talk to her after. Because I didn't know how powerful it was. I didn't,
Yeah. And as Richie was sharing with us last time, it was, they had cast Jesus as a lady. They started the play with headlines. There was a lot. It was and it was just a reimagination of the Christmas story. And a demarketization of that story. Yeah. And it captured the real essence of Christmas. And I still remember that play, and I cried because I always long for art that is justice and faith all together, meshed together, seeking that. So yeah, so thank you for that. And I think that play is on YouTube for people who are looking. It's called Reimagining Christmas. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll share it on the Msingi page for everybody who wants.
Yeah.
Moses, for you?
For me, as I said, I was introduced to music very early, and then my mother was musical.
Just a minute. Your sound, there's something that's scratching with the sound. Before it was okay.
How about now?
There's still a scratch.
Just try pulling out the headphones.
I pulled them out already.
Oh. Yeah,
is it still there?
Yeah.
Okay, and now?
Yeah, still crackling.
How about this?
Just talk.
Is it better now?
Yes, that's better, I think. Yeah.
Okay. My apologies for that. So I started singing. I'm told I started singing way before I could even speak, and so naturally, I think that that went on into church. I began singing in church choir with my mother. And so eventually, naturally, I started to lead singing early in church. And so worship leading came naturally that way. And I ended up becoming a music minister. And so as I was leading worship in different circles, I began to scour through hymnals. And even in school, in my pastoral training, I pursued music as well. And one of the courses I took was on hymnology. And as I'm working through the different hymnals, I realized that the hymnals, what they did was to present a picture of the history of the theological development of the church. But then at some point, it just goes silent. So I would look for songs that would hopefully help people sing their current Christian experience, maybe of being filled with the Holy Spirit or of exercising a spiritual gift, and there wouldn't be any. Much recently, we've had conversations around sexuality and this whole LGBTQ agenda and all these things. There are no songs that address that. There are no songs that teach us and our children about what godly sexuality looks like. And I'm like, man, we need to write these songs. Somebody needs to write these songs. John Wesley and his brother wrote the songs they wrote at the time that they did because those were the theological questions being canvassed at the time. We do not have songs of the Christian body today that address the issues we deal with today, and then there's a disconnect there. So yes, that's the journey. That's basically how I began to get to where I'm at today. With recognizing the need to keep writing songs for us, for our experiences.
Wow, thank you. Songs that especially if you look right now about the COVID crisis in Kenya, about extrajudicial executions and corruption and poverty, the gap between the rich and the poor if
Right.
you went to church right now, you would not think those things exist. And yeah, so I hear you. Richie?
Yeah, let me just follow up on what Moses is saying. There was a Saturday, I think, when there was a fire in Moi Girls,
Mm.
and the following Sunday, I was to lead worship, yeah, and I kept wondering, well, what do I do? Like, well, what song do we sing? Do we just come and do the same celebratory songs? As if Moi Girls is maybe a kilometer from where our church is. It's like, do we just kind of just say a prayer and just go on with our worship set of celebratory songs? And I remember that time being in such conflict. And I think that what I had to do is I went and played. I told the guys in the back just to play a song by William McDowell that says, "Give us your heart for the broken, your heart." And I just told guys, you just sit down and just listen to the words of this song, because in my library of songs, I had nothing that I could use for this moment of pain and grief. And I was kind of unwilling to just let it just pass as if it hasn't happened. So yes, we need to write our songs. We need to write our songs and we need to write these songs. And yes, like Moses said, we're not saying there's anything wrong with celebratory worship songs, yeah? But we also, I think, have to face the fact that a lot of the songs that we sing in our churches, are songs of privilege and comfort. Because if you grow up in poverty, injustice, extrajudicial songs, your songs become different. Part of the journey that brought us to this place, and we keep growing, is, you ask your questions. For instance, why is Rastafarianism the religion of the ghetto, of the poor, of the marginalized? You walk around, and why do they connect with Bob Marley and with Haile Selassie? Why not Christianity? Because at some point Christianity became, hijacked by privilege and comfort, and that's what really Amos in his book is really talking about, and rebuking the church for this comfort and this privilege that allows you to come, lift your hands on Sunday, and your house help can't even get a day off, because she has to hold fort for you because you've been working all week, and Sunday afternoon is when it's the only time you have to, you get. So we lift our hands, but we're still such perpetrators of such injustice in people's lives, and God says that worship, like, I want nothing to do with that, it has nothing to do with me, because if you do not care for the oppressed and the marginalized, then you cannot pretend to have seen me. Yeah. So we really need to do the work, like I said last time, just do the work of really asking the questions. I think a lot of us are too comfortable with what our pastor tells us on Sunday. And there's nothing wrong with that, And a lot of us are afraid to even speak out against the pastor, because the pastor is so even if God is telling you something in the secret place, if your pastor hasn't said it, then it can't be God, We need to do the work. And in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. So God is speaking, and sometimes we have to go under. We have to go under the ground to find him, in those paths that are downtrodden, in those ugly places, in those dark spaces, That's where we find him. That's where you find kind of the authentic Christ. And we have to go there and start to reimagine a Christianity and a worship, start to reimagine what our songs can look like if we encounter that kind of real presence of God. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. At this very deep point, I'd like to welcome my co-moderator, Dannish. Dannish, karibu.
Hey, hello everyone. Poleni nimechelewa. Traffic leo mbaya sana.
Pole sana.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
yeah. Asante.
Karibu.
All right.
Dannish, chukua
yeah.
the pulse.
I'm gonna stir the waters a little bit, and I think I'll start with Leslie Mutua. What if the people who are actually singing these songs that are for comfort, songs that are coming from hip hop, and this is the section, why must we divide music, Christian and non-Christian? And for me, I think in 2019, when I was in a bad place, the one song that really ministered to me in that moment was Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, because I felt my heart was being wrecked, So why must we, what if Miley Cyrus was just a human being inspired and wrote that song? Why must we limit it that church must sing songs that comfort and church must do this, while there's a whole lot of options out here?
Wow, Dannish. I obviously can only answer that from my perspective, but that's where I was. That's how I grew up, because I think it was just safer for us to just listen to the music that kept us in this box, that was just where we hear songs that sing that's talk about safe topics. They don't go too out there, they keep us within certain boundaries, because if we start to listen to the music out there, then we begin to ask questions, we begin to interrogate perhaps scripture, like for example, what Richie was just talking about earlier, when and he's the one who told me, just listen to this song. There's a time our daughter we were in church, and it was Car Park Fellowship, and then she started singing, what song was it? It was a Bob Marley song at the top of her lungs, like people can hear. Buffalo Soldier, and I remember Richie had actually taught them that song, and he was trying to explain, what it means and stuff. And so she was just singing from a point of having just, had her dad talk her through this song and what it meant. And then she's singing it at the top of her lungs in church. So some young guy comes and tells me, hey, Abu, talk to your daughter. She shouldn't be singing these songs in church. And at that point, I was able to ask him, but why? What is it? Is there untruth? What makes you uncomfortable about it? So I think it's about a certain comfort level that as believers, as Christians, we haven't been able to kind of just get out of. That would be my answer.
Any of you can jump in if you have an answer. Richie, Moses, any of you can jump into that question.
Let me say, Moses, you want to go?
Well, let me give it a try. For the longest time, I grew up with this whole sacred secular divide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
and you see, we were taught that unless a song has got the word God in it or Jesus, then it's not a gospel song. And if you're to come out of the world and do not mix with them. I think over time I have grown to understand this. There isn't sacred or secular, but there is godly and ungodly. That's a distinction that scriptures make. Otherwise, all of life is spiritual. I was introduced to that understanding by now I forget his name, but I forget his name totally. But he was an amazing Christian minister who eventually, for some reason, left the faith. But at the time, he was asking the tough questions, and one of the things he said is that there is no such thing as sacred and secular. There is such a thing as a whole life. Then there is, and then I think I eventually developed that and moved beyond there and to understand there was such a thing as godly and ungodly, and that's really what there is. So we should be perhaps in a position to sing those songs. Whether or not those will be welcome within our sanctuaries of worship, that's a whole different conversation, bro.
Richie?
Let me say, I think God can use anyone. God can use anything He has created. He may use an animal, a donkey, to speak out. And if we don't praise Him, the rocks will cry out. God can use anything, yeah? Right. And God would rather use His chosen one, His people, His children. But too many times, because of this hijack that has happened with Christianity, God has to use other voices. God has to use what we would say secular voices. I mean, have you listened to Bob? Have you listened to reggae music? Doesn't it just color life as it is right now? Talk about injustice, oppression. That's the stuff in the Bible. But we've kind of demonized a different religion and said that those guys just smoke weed and stuff. I'm telling you, like, if you listen to Rastafarians, they'll quote scripture in places in the Bible which you never as a Christian have ever even ventured into. They talk about Ezekiel, they're talking about Isaiah, they're talking about deep scripture. And you're like, my goodness, like, where I have been a Christian all my life and I have never interacted with these scriptures in this way. So to answer your question, God can use anything. He would much prefer to use His people, His children, the ones who are meant to be called out of the world. But because, I don't know, we become kind of like deaf to His voice. And we can break down that in so many levels. You see, scripture is interpreted to us on a linear kind of perspective. So everything else outside of that is not scriptural, or you shouldn't listen to it. You get, like, we put God in a box, yeah? We put Him in a box, and you cannot put God in a box. He's too big for that. So yeah.
Yeah, and Nelson Mandela once.
A little, with your
Okay,
permission.
Go on, Moses. Go on, Moses. Yeah.
And say, we do not have, as Christians, a monopoly on truth. That's really important. God, as Richie said, God can use anyone. And I think there are bits and pieces of truth that everybody has, all these different movements have come across. And God has laid it that way, and scriptures tell us, so that in the hope that then they would seek Him and find Him. So it is no mistake. It's not an accident that they do have certain gems of truth within their body of knowledge. God hopes, though, that they will use that to seek Him then and eventually find Him. But we cannot claim to have a monopoly of truth. Thank you.
That's a fantastic punchline. I hope, Carol, you're sharing that online. We do not have a monopoly of truth. Truth exists, and God, But then this also introduces a fantastic topic. In the church, we've sometimes demonized languages that don't seem mainstream. For example, Sheng, I grew up with Koflani Mau Mau. I grew up with Kiliocha Haki, and I grew up in the Nora Phase 1, part of it, But also another thing is the word vernacular. It's like when we are so afraid of singing in vernacular that if you sing in vernacular, if you sing Luo, if you sing Kikuyu, if you sing Kamba, if you sing, we are living in a country where tribe has become so, so demonized that if you speak in a vernacular language, that sounds almost like it's offensive. Yet Nelson Mandela, that if you speak to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in the language that they know, their language, it goes to their heart. What can we do mostly in urban churches to bring back, writing songs in our vernacular languages and trying to speak truth in the languages that we truly understand and we grew up with? Because if you say one thing in a foreign language and one thing in your language, it means totally entirely thing. Is there space with that? Let's start with Leslie.
I agree with that. Wow, in Kamba, there's so many, there's a way you say things and it's so deep when you translate it to English, the meaning kind of gets lost in there. I have a friend who helped me realize that you can still actually worship God, even if the songs are in a language that's, not entirely familiar to you. And so I kind of just developed my philosophy around that. I think like what she'd do is she'd pick a word, and like if they're singing a song that she's not familiar with, she kind of just listens out, and if she catches a word that's familiar, then she clings to that and runs with it. So if she thinks this word might mean holy, she runs with that, and then she worships God because he's holy, and just continues with that. But I think another thing also that I want to say about this is there's a Sunday where in our church we had about 5 or 6 worship leaders, and each one of them taught the congregation a song in their language. So I think we had the Luo, there was a language from Uganda, there was Kikuyu, there was Kamba, I can't remember the others, but they would come and then they would teach the song, explain what it means, and then teach it to us, and then we would then sing it. And it was such a powerful experience, because I think every language carries the shared experiences of that culture. And, it was just powerful because there was so much happening there. So I think different languages should be incorporated in worship. I think worship leaders should do the work of learning new songs. And not that now every congregational member has to have their language, used, but I think it's up to the worship leaders to do the work of finding out who is in your congregation, and how can you minister to them, because even though there are people from a certain tribe, or there could be people from different countries altogether, I think it's important to do the work of finding out what would minister to your congregation and each in the different individuals, because in most of our churches they're cross-cultural, and we want everybody to feel they're welcome to the table, I think.
Richard?
Yeah.
Any comment on that?
Yes, I agree. I want to bring in a different perspective as well, because I think as a worship leader, the first idol, let me call it, when you're planning to lead worship, is that thing you call the worship set, the list of songs. And you want from your call to worship to the last song there to be like this transition and just this flow, yeah. And that sometimes puts you in a box, because if we're talking about writing and singing songs of lament and protest, those will interrupt that flow. It might mean you need to stop. It might mean you need to talk a little. Might mean you need some silence at some point, you get. And that completely messes up with just that philosophy, that worship is meant to just kind of, and you'll see it, at the end of the service, when you've done this flowing set, people will walk up to you and be like, that worship was good. But if you start kind of stopping it and interrupting it, people are like, what are you doing? We were going nicely, and then you started to, you get, so, and then we also fall into the trap of, we write the song set for the audience that is our church. You get. So if you have, like in our instance, you have a missionary community that comes there, you want them to get a bit of, what they would get when they're back home, and you still have, you look at your audience, and that sometimes you put yourself in that box. So in essence, sometimes you're writing for the audience rather than writing from God's heart, and that's where the difference. What is God saying at this time? What does He want you to highlight or to sing about or to bring before Him? You get. So we need to kind of disrupt that thinking and really take worship back to God. I think when Amos is saying it like all you give me these days is your ego music, is because worship has become about us and all these audiences and contexts that we try to fit God into, rather than what is in God's heart and what does he want us to sing to him. Audience of one, yeah? And language becomes familiar. Even English itself becomes familiar. You know, people can, you can do a set of familiar songs and people will sing at the top of their voices, but that does not mean that they have worshipped God. In fact, many times when you introduce a new song and people are learning and they have to look at the words and figure out the words sentence by sentence, then you probably have a better chance, or you would think that people have actually connected with God that morning because they were actually paying attention to what they were lifting up to God, rather than just mouthing things that they have memorized, just what they're used to in church. Yeah.
Moses, I will give you a different, because I feel like that question is exhausted, but I mean, would you, in your experience as a writer, and have you done songs that speak about social justice, and how was it received? And how would we introduce that? Maybe in a worship set, Lord, I lift your name on high. Then we say, Baby Pendo died. Let's think about that. Do you think there's room for that? And have you ever tried something like that?
So first off, I had a different angle to the previous question, but
go on. You can go on. Yeah.
What Richie has said is very true. In fact, I feel you, bro, man. I feel you. I think in worship leading has been pretty similar, and that's important. I learned the concept of heart language, and it's important to describe that. Many times we imagine that heart language is vernacular, and that may not always be the case. For a lot of people, vernacular may be their heart language, but for some, it may not be. I'm one of those for whom vernacular isn't quite it. I basically sleep, dream, process in English. Actually, that's how you get to know what is your heart language. The language you dream in when you're asleep, that's your heart language. That's the language with which to really worship God if you when you're really going for deep worship. And so that's an important concept to understand. But why is it important to write these songs in vernacular, or rather in the heart language of the people? I think that's what we're trying to zero in on. And I think there are two or three reasons for which we need to do that. One, when we do so, the message goes further, okay? Meaning we have more people being roped in, and it goes deeper, so there's a deeper impact. And that's important for transformation and for the pursuit of justice. I think of it this way. Transformation happens as rumbles of the voice of justice creates a critical mass. Okay, so the voice of justice begins and there's rumbling, and somehow it catches on, and then there's a critical mass. And then when the critical mass has been hit and it grows enough, it becomes a popular movement for change. We're talking here about pursuit of justice. Justice won't happen if we don't push for change. And so that's really important. And I guess I can wrap it up from a pastoral perspective. People then get to realize and understand and appreciate that even in the midst of their difficulties, God has not forgotten them. When we insist on singing only celebratory songs, to people who are suffering day after day after day after day, they come to church and think, God hasn't touched me. But when you introduce a song that speaks about their suffering and enables them to raise their voice to God so he may hear their suffering, then they walk away knowing God has not forgotten them. And I have heard people say this for sure, there is God in heaven. When they say that, it's because they now finally have connected. They've now finally realized God has connected with where they are. Yet he was already there, they just didn't sense it. And we have the priestly role of helping them connect with God where they are, because until they've done so, they keep thinking they're walking alone.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah. Second one?
So the second one, man, I have attempted. I have not yet gotten to where I really write songs for social justice. This has been perhaps one of the most recent things I'm still growing into. But in terms of how I think is perhaps the best way to do it, I have found that when I take a song that we already know about and then write an extra maybe verse or extra phrase that now connects with what we are doing or what we're feeling right now and connect it to an already existing song, then people connect. And then it also helps to lead them from the known to the unknown in terms of their experience of worship. Singing songs of lament and singing songs of protest in a worshipful setting is an unknown for a lot of us today. And so for worship leaders, if we're going to lead people into that arena, we need to use the known and connect that known to the unknown, and that way people connect the dots a lot better.
All right, fantastic feedback. Leslie, let me ask you, what kind of space are you in? What kind of season are you in right now? And what song is really, what kind of songs are really speaking to you in this moment, in this season? Of course, you know, we've had issues of COVID and blah, 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 you know. So I just want to know that. And I think all of us will answer that. Let me start. For me, I don't have a particular song right now. However, there's a song called In Control by Hillsong. And that song really, there's a line that says that though the seas are raging, you'll quiet them. I'll look for the lyrics exactly. And I think anytime I'm in a place where I feel like I'm overwhelmed and things are slipping, you know, I'm like in a quicksand, that I go back to that song. I like to know, you know, because sometimes I want us to then ground this conversation to practical examples of how songs have lifted us from the places where we were, maybe in a place of confusion, a place of worry, a place of anxiety, a place of fear, a place of hopelessness. And then it gave us hope and it carried us through that season. Leslie.
Right now, I think in terms of the songs that are speaking to me right now, I feel like songs that have a lot of, you know, where you don't even have words to express or explain how you feel, or how you can't put into words how God has been so good, that it's just you just sing from the heart, and it doesn't have to have words, doesn't have to use words. I wish that, I guess, we'd get over the awkwardness of the silence, where we honestly can't even speak during worship. We can't even move. I want to be able to just be in his presence and feel it so tangibly that hours pass and it just feels like a minute. You know, those are the kinds of songs that I'm looking for, that I'm into right now. Also, just songs about his faithfulness and his goodness are good. But like Moses, I also feel I want, you know, Moses was talking about wanting songs that talked about more godly sexuality, you know, and I'm also saying, you know, that I would like to listen to songs that explain more about Jesus. Like, he was born into captivity, right? So he gets slavery and what that does to a people. He was born into poverty, so he gets being poor. He was brutalized by the authorities, so he gets that as well. He was dissed by his friends. People were too busy to, you know, hang out with him, or they were just weirded out by, you, what are you into, you know, and they didn't want to associate with him anymore. So just songs that, you know, talk about Jesus from those different angles, and bring his experiences closer to ours, and just
All right, Richie, and then also there's a question that Carol is asking, can we speak to worship leaders who don't know how to write these songs? So even as we respond, I think, you know, Richie and Moses, mark those two questions.
Yeah, I think right now, the season I am in is just being so fascinated and drawn into the presence of God. Yeah. There's a song called "Bringing Back the Ark," and it talks about the moment when David goes to bring the Ark of God, the Ark of the Covenant, which was the presence of God, back into Jerusalem. Yeah, and it's the one we always know, where he danced until, you know, he kind of disgraced himself in front of his wife. Yeah, and I think, just to connect with your questions, you know, how can we as worship leaders begin to write this kind of songs? I think this work, I'm realizing more and more, has to be spirit-led. You know, the writing of these songs and this, all this poetry and all this art has to be spirit-led. It cannot be something that we can do in the flesh or out of our own strength. Cannot be something we do as a reaction to things that we're learning and seeing around us. Has to be something that comes straight from God's heart, you know. And how do we know God's heart? It's by getting into his presence, you know, just loving his presence, you know, in the midst of everything that's happening, that we can kind of run into that tent, you know, like Moses would do every day, and the Israelites would watch him every morning, going exact time into that tent, you know, to meet with God, so that we can hear from God, you know, and he can help us be able to write these songs for our churches, for our communities. Yeah. And when we get into God's presence, then we need to teach ourselves to listen, you know, to listen to his voice. And then when he speaks, then we can speak. And he is speaking. When he writes, then we can write. Sometimes I describe it sometimes as a writer, you feel as if God himself is writing on your heart, you know. He's writing it himself, you know. You're turning and waking in your sleep, and he writes, and you feel like he's crumbled that paper and thrown it and started writing afresh, you know. Or he deletes that word and he puts another word, you know. And when we were doing the reimagining Christmas script, you know, Leslie would get frustrated because every morning I would wake up and be like, no, you know what, this scene, you know, needs to look like this. I feel, you know, like, and you just feel like God is writing and rewriting. And Jeremiah says it so well, you know. It's like his word is like fire in my belly, you know. I cannot hold it in, you know. I have to let it out. I have to speak, and I have to say what he says. And a lot of what he's going to say might get you in trouble with your church leaders, might get you kicked out, you know. And but we have to be in that secret place, so that he can kind of equip us, so that when all these things are happening and everything is shifting, you know, then we can still have our hope in him, because he's the one who has sent us. So I think that's what I am learning, you know, as I attempt now to start writing songs. And it's strange that when God captures your heart in this way, all you think about is just how songs of lament and hope can come together into worship music. You know, somebody sends you a tune and your heart just goes to that place, you know. It goes to those places and you're like, that's all I want to sing about. That's all I want to write about. And yes, I still sing celebratory songs, and I even love them more now, I think. But captures your heart, and you just want to write, you just want writing in your heart at that moment. So after I respond to that, yeah. We lose Dannish.
Moses.
Right. Hey, what's going on? I think a lot is going on, and my mind is being racked by a lot of that. But I think the things that really stand out to me about what's going on in the world around me is I feel like there's been a crazy acceleration of the technological takeover and the deepening and the tightening on the grip of power by national governments. I feel like something has really changed in terms of in the realm of relationship between the governed and the ones governing. We will see it, I think, unraveling with time, but I feel like something has really changed there during this COVID season. And then I also feel, I mean, we all know there's a rather fierce conversation going on the question of race relations. I call it fierce conversation because I don't think we're not, I'm hoping we're not fighting yet. That's me trying to hopefully, hoping that we're not fighting yet, but we are having a really fierce conversation. The songs I feel like we need to really be writing in response should be, one of those has to do with race relations. And I'll draw from a conversation I had with a friend of mine. She's white. And this is what she said. She said, part of the problem going on is she feels the whites have, they don't realize that whilst they may have stopped, active race slavery, no one has really come out among them, the leaders of those communities, to come out and say, hey, what we did was wrong, and offer an apology and repent before God. And so because of that, this thing that happened still has its roots somewhere. It's just not active, but it's there, and the bitterness continues to flow on because forgiveness also hasn't been given as well. So I feel like songs need to be written. I'm praying that some white guy somewhere will come out and sing, and the acknowledgement of the misuse of white power and privilege. The power and the privilege are not a problem by themselves. It's a misuse that's been a problem, and that needs to be, acknowledged and repented of. Then I think we also need to sing songs about being human and pointing to the powers that be and telling them, hey, the world is human and we want to remain human. Let us remain human. We don't want this technological takeover because it's coming. I feel it. I think we need to push back against it. Those are the songs that I feel we need to have. Now, connecting to your second question, how then do we write these songs? Richie earlier talked about writers needing to have a secret place. A lot of us don't have that secret place to begin with. So our staple for growing spiritually is what the pastor preaches on the pulpit, but they're not preaching what we need to hear in order to write the songs of change that we need to write. So you need your own personal secret place. That is not negotiable. We've got to write our own songs. I feel a lot of us as well in this African culture, we tend to do a lot of things communally or collaboratively. Let's also organize songwriting retreats. And guys come together and collaborate and reflect on scripture together, then walk away from there and write songs together. Some may write alone, some may write together, but I have seen a lot of amazing stuff coming out of collaborative efforts. And maybe that's why I'm here. But that may be partly why I was invited here, because I have had, experience with some of that. And I would love, by the way, this is an open check already to Msingi Trust. I really would like to collab with you guys on organizing a songwriting retreat that brings people together. Let's do this. Let's write these songs. Let's have holy reflection that brings out holy songs from a holy place. I really want to see that. Dannish, you are...
Sorry, I see Leslie agreeing. Leslie, you're up for the challenge?
Hey, I'm ready.
Yeah,
I'm ready. I think, yeah.
I also want to put you on the spotlight again. What if we get ghost writers who are actually writing all these social justice songs to write them for us in the church, and we sing? Maybe because the honest truth is this, that sometimes the churches we go to, we are just too withdrawn from the reality of pain and suffering and oppression. The middle class bubble, you've got your bills paid and stuff. Maybe what if we collaborate with people who are living those realities, social justice center movement? What if we partnered with IJM? What if we partner with organizations so that we go and let them go straight for us? Would that be an abomination?
So they go straight and then
they go straight for us. Yeah, those who are living that reality go straight for us, so that then we are able to also, because I feel like sometimes when you're withdrawn from the reality of the pain of the people, it's very hard to advocate for it. It's very hard to sing songs of lament, songs of of protest when you have a bubble of privilege, and which I know many of us. The honest truth is I think even ourselves in this panel, we are beneficiaries of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I go to a church. Well, a few weeks ago, we were told that no, when church resumed, one of the pastors said that, you see, there is no need to own a house in Nairobi. But I wondered, how about those who were rendered homeless? Those who are homeless. You get that privilege. So anyway, back to you, and you can jump in. Any of you can jump in this. It's just a discussion. It can be our own thoughts and anything.
Maybe I can speak to that. Dannish, you'd be surprised. What you've said is very true. I can't. I think part of the reason I haven't been able to write some of those songs is I haven't felt that pain. That's just a reality. And so I can't write from an imaginary standpoint. However, I have learned that when I hang out with guys who are in that space and walk with them, they can write those songs. Okay, they can write those songs. We have churches in all those different places. In fact, the largest number of churches that exist are in those informal settlements and in the rural areas. We just need to take time out and go sit with them and sit with them in those trenches and walk with them to write the songs they need to write, and then we adopt those songs as our songs too. So I think that would be the healthier road to walk. And I'm not saying we can't reach out to IJM and all. I'm just saying there is a healthier way to walk, which is really have these guys, give them a voice. We have the voice. We have the tools for voicing what needs to be voiced. Why don't we sit with them and work with them to give them the voice that they need?
Danny, I'd like to come in because I really, this point for me comes very personally, and maybe Moses, you and I can reflect on that. But I think when we talk about power, especially, I'd like to speak about power is to look at what Jesus's definition of power was, and Jesus's power was power from below. It was never power from above.
Right.
And the way that the hierarchy of power right now, even in our churches, even in the songwriting spaces, power in our political spaces, in churches, in all of them, tends to, when we talk about power and privilege, it tends to be power and privilege that is privileged by wealth and capitalism and colonialism. And so when we say that there is nothing wrong with power, sometimes there's we think people we might tend to think that there's nothing wrong with that power that oppresses. I think in terms of especially the music and the social location of Jesus, we see that he socially located himself with the power from below, the power at the margins, the power of the people. And so when we are writing, I honestly think that I'm not a songwriter myself, but I wonder how different it would be if the songs that we sing in our churches are songs that are written by a mother whose child was killed by the cops.
Right.
You know, I wonder how different. And Arundhati Roy, and I always say this, and I sound like a broken record when I say this, Arundhati Roy has a quote that says, "There's nothing like voicelessness. It's just people whose voice has been taken away from them." And so what is that? Why, as people with access, as people with linkages, what does it mean for even with the songwriting retreats that we are talking about, what it is about handing pen and paper, or people, wherever people can write, and giving room and space for people to write songs. And I think that would bring different language, and it would bring different songs. It will bring different expressions of worship into the space. And also that calls for humility for people who are of a higher social economic class, people who've always had privilege and power, to listen to people who've not had privilege and power. Yeah.
I'd have to say I agree.
Yeah, we were still checking on Richard. Yeah, Richie gone.
Yeah, today I saw a quote as I was preparing for this that says that the world is full of believers whose voices are not being heard because they do not fit into popular mainstream Christian culture. And the church must go underground. You know, that's where if we talk about power and privilege, that's where God is. You know, theology from the bottom, you know, the perspective from the bottom rather than, you know, from the top, you know, in the margins, the oppressed, yeah? And even more so, you know, being into those spaces, I think, like I started by saying in the beginning, it's our perspective of how we see God needs to be aligned or to be changed, you know, like righteousness and justice, you know, is in harmony, yeah? Rather than two competing attributes. And I think once we get the correct posture, you know, where we see God, then our worship will change. Our songs will change. You can walk into Jeremiah, you can walk into Ezekiel, you can walk into Amos, you know, you can walk into those places where God really pours out his heart for those he loves, yeah? And God will give you a heart for that, for the broken, a heart for the oppressed. We live kind of like in the countryside, kind of in the village. And when you're here also is when you tend to see how power and privilege works and how people become marginalized because of their level of education. We live kind of like in the countryside, so kind of in the village. Yeah. So that's we have to see God differently, yeah? And then our worship will change, our music will change, the things our heart bleeds for will change, yeah? Yeah.
All right, Richard, actually there are a lot of comments. I'd like to clarify that it seems our audience, there's a concept in music called ghost writing. You don't, like somebody writes and then you own. I don't know how, like for example, Mr. V wrote Mwema for Mercy Masika, but Mercy Masika sang it. Because sometimes a musician may not be in a place to write certain songs, but then there's somebody else who can write those songs, and then a musician is maybe gifted with the voice, gifted with the cloud, and all. I just need to need that. Martha Mwada says that it's absolutely okay to own your privilege. What we have a problem with is you not using that privilege to agitate for social justice and rights. Absolutely agree with her. Recognizing though that they may not have the luxury of retreat, how to subvert the power to facilitate the amplification of the silenced. I feel like what the comment is saying, how then do we connect the struggles? How then do we connect the tools we have at our disposal, maybe to sing, and maybe the audience and the resources we have, then now we're able to take them to the marginalized. I think we have a few more minutes to go, but I just want to now, as we come to a close, I just want to find out what really has been outstanding for you guys. And we start with Leslie. What has been one of the things you've picked here, and what are you committing to do, or not committing rather, but what has been outstanding for you? Because the commitment is too much of a need to make here.
There's a few things. I'll pick one. Moses talked about the secret place, getting there and allowing, God to speak. And I think like I shared at the very beginning, I'm a bit new to this, to this place, to these conversations. And there are a lot of things that, of course, as I grew up, have, a lot of truths and a lot of things have embedded themselves in me, and things that I think I need it to go into that secret place for God to reveal to me my heart, for God to, weed out those things which are not true, weed out those things which would stand in the way of, just that marriage that she's talking about, of, righteousness and justice, and understanding that, and, yeah. So I try to use this verse to kind of help me in that secret place. God, I invite your searching gaze into my heart. Examine me through and through. Find out everything that may be hidden within me. Put me to the test and sift through all my anxious cares. See if there's any path of pain I'm walking on, and lead me back to your glorious everlasting ways, the path that brings me back to you. And that's Psalm 139, verse 23. And that's just kind of just helping me come before God and be like, to, weed out, like, you know what? I know this is what I think, this is what I've always known, but, you are showing us in this day, in this age, that you are into justice. That justice is big for him, and especially.
Sorry, you got muted there.
The host muted us. Carol.
I'm sorry. There was something that I was trying to sort out, and then yeah. Go on, Leslie. Sorry.
No, it's
Leslie,
fine.
are you done?
Pretty much. Yes, I was.
All right, Moses and Richard, before you guys respond to that question, I have a question, which I'm a creative. I used to write songs. I do a lot of creative work. The battle I've always had in this space that Carol brought me back in is how to preserve my own feelings. Sometimes I feel so drained. Sometimes I feel so, I battle cynicism every day. I've got to feel like, sometimes I feel hopeless. Carol, by then I need to tell you that sometimes, these spaces when you see a lot of pain and a lot of injustice and a lot of anxiety and worry in the space we are in, I want to know, how have you guys managed to preserve that source to keep it, let me not say pure, but to keep it sane, so that then you're not driven into the abyss of cynicism, negativity, depression, that then eventually can even lead some of us to question the very same faith that we believe will deliver this world from the injustices that it suffers from. Moses, Richie. Moses, you've not unmuted yourself?
Yeah, you're on mute.
Okay. Richie, go on then. Okay.
Okay. I think again, it's something I'm still learning on. I think the dependence on the Holy Spirit is really the only way I can think that can get you through some of the pushback, if you like, that comes when you disrupt church. I think the Holy Spirit is what we have to depend on. Sometimes He will want us to talk back. Sometimes He will want us to be silent. Sometimes He will want us to even ignore, because sometimes even the criticism is internal. You as a creative, as an artist, many times, you look at your work and the criticism starts from being out inside even before it gets outside. Yeah. So I think the only thing that we can do is depend on the Holy Spirit. Again, like I said, speak when He speaks, write when He writes. And I mean this for everything, even your Facebook posts or your tweet, or, like, let's just stop kind of going by ourselves or going ahead of God, because I think when God sends you, then God will help you handle whatever comes out of the message that He has given you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think I have been through that space where being or witnessing lots of pain out there, and immersing myself in it as I'm with people. At some point, it would wear me down completely, and I would end up in depression. In fact, for me, it got so bad at some point that my health totally just gave way. I couldn't operate anymore. There's something people call cumulative exhaustion, or others have called CTSD, cumulative traumatic stress disorder. I got that. It took me 2 years to recover, 2.5 years to recover. And I think I have learned from that to still engage. I still need to engage. God still sends me in there. I still need to engage. And when I engage, I immerse completely. I immerse spiritually, emotionally, in every way. What I've learned to do is I go in, I take each of those instances as an assignment. So I step in and immerse myself. Then when I step out, I actually go back to the Lord and say, now, Lord, please disconnect me from this. Yeah. And I leave that at His feet and pray it over and release it to Him, so that it's not on my shoulders anymore. Because when it's on my shoulders, I'll carry something else on, and something else, and something else, and I'll eventually crumble again. So I've learned that over time. It took me years to get there. I had to literally crash in order to learn what it is I have shared with you. So I don't know if that helps, but that's how I deal with it these days. I'll step in as an assignment. Then when I come out of it, I disengage. I basically disengage in prayer and release it to the Lord. I still keep social connections going. I still connect with people, and all the relationships will remain, but I will not retain that experience with me as a burden on my shoulders anymore.
Carol, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as we come to an end.
Well, ask your question again. I was trying to get.
I'm just wondering, you and I are in this space, where we hear a lot of stories of injustice. We meet people who are brutalized. We meet the oppressed. We meet the marginalized. We interact with them every day, of course, in the social justice movement. The battle I've always had is that as a creative and as somebody who's very sensitive and a feeler, I get overwhelmed, and that sometimes the reality becomes just so negative that I feel cynical. I feel like evil is so powerful, we're not going to defeat it, and it's done. And I sometimes even question my own faith in this moment. How do you keep your own sanity in this space so that then you minister from a place of hope while all around you, you are surrounded in a sea of despair?
All honesty, I think that I would, even based from my my upbringing, I've grown up in Dagoretti, gone to local public schools, I think I would call my social location as poor up, but just below up poor. That's been my upbringing, and got the opportunity to have an education. But I'd like to point out two people who for me give me an answer to this story. The first one is Mama Victor. Mama Victor is a mother who's lost two children through extrajudicial executions in Madare during the post-election violence. And I will never, even 1%, be Mama Victor or know what Mama Victor goes through. But she somehow gets the courage, and she picks herself, and she and she is now the leader of Mothers of Victims. So when I look at Mama Victor and how she is personally, like she doesn't need to wear anybody's shoes. Those are her shoes. I look at her and that floors me. And the other one is I call him the Archbishop, but it's Wilfred Olal, the coordinator of the Justice Center's working group. When I hear him, and he's been doing it for over 20 years, when I see the heart that he has for communities, when I see that he eats social justice and fighting for human rights defenders. And actually, I can name so many other people, especially with the social justice centers movement, who Marianne Kasina, Faith Kasina, all those friends, Julie, and we remember Julie so vividly. She's the lady who refused to be arrested during the Sabasaba riots. These are people who've given their hearts and their lives for the movement, for the struggle. And so for me, my hope is in the fact that, one, I am not alone, that this is not a Carol struggle, that this is a collective struggle. And two, that if someone whose son was shot can have courage, can have what it takes to move from one day to another, even when I feel like the burden is too high, I have the chance to take a matatu and come home. Mama Victor doesn't, yet she still fights. So I tap into that. I tap into the hope that and the strength that my comrades and my friends have. And yeah, and also the fact that no one will get out of this earth alive. It sounds morbid, but for us, we cling to our lives too much. We cling to safety and security too much. Yet Christ has come and told us that there's life after death. So us who have a hope of life after death, why are we scared of death? You know, why are we scared of giving our all for the liberation of everybody? You know, we have that hope. We cling on to our hope that there is life after death. And I think when the writers were writing that, they were to tell us, do not fear death. And because you are not to fear death, do every single thing that that brings life to people on this earth. So for me, that's my hope. My hope is in seeing the determination of my comrades and also that there's life after death. There really is. Death is not the end. And if you kill us, our children will continue with the struggle.
May I write on that briefly?
Go on.
Say this, guys. I think the more I think about this, the more I wake up to. I become more awake to the fact that the struggle for justice is an unending necessity for as long as we live in an unjust world. The struggle for justice is important for us because only when justice is exercised and practiced is God glorified. I connect that with the Christian faith, that our Christian faith is perhaps the purest fuel for that struggle for justice. There isn't gonna be a more pure fuel than that, ever, anywhere on planet Earth. And I think finally, as an artist, and speaking to artists out there, it's important for us to understand then that our art is a creative, expressive voice that is needed for that struggle.
Amen. Leslie, a final comments, final words?
Wow, I'm still reeling from what Carol just said, that if they kill us, our children will go on fighting. For me, if I'm to say anything final, I'd say, I think, wow, I don't want to reiterate too much, but just to tap into just the Holy Spirit, for him to guide us as we live, as we move, as we breathe, that he would guide us in everything that we're doing, even our songwriting and song leading, that we would operate in obedience, you know, because I think in moments like these, in times like these, what God requires of us must be the most important thing, you know. It must be more than anything that we would even offer him, or, you know, we would do for him, that we must obey him, because he's wanting to do something. He's moving, he's speaking through our music, through our hearts, through our, you know, you just hear even how people are sharing, you know, the passion with which we are talking about these matters, you know, that God is moving, and so that we would act in obedience to him. I think that is very important.
Richie, your final words?
Yeah, like Carol to say, the problem with Christianity is that Christians became comfortable in this earth, you know, privilege and comfort, instead of looking forward to that new heaven. We've built our hopes, our trust in the systems of this earth. So anytime something comes or God requires us to shift those systems or destroy those systems, then we kind of go into a panic, And also to say that true worship is sustained in justice. You know, without justice, we cannot. We would be lying to say that we worship the true God. If we cannot have this harmony between righteousness and justice, then you know, sometimes you wonder, you know, it feels to me sometimes like Jesus left the building a long time ago, you know, and maybe part of the pandemic was him coming with a whip, you know, because he's so sick and tired of what has been going on in his holy place, you know, that he wants us to all kind of just go home and self-reflect. And that's why these conversations are so important at this time, you know. How have we, what's our perspective of God? You know, because unless we have righteousness and justice in harmony together, then we might as well just close the churches and go home, you know, because without justice, you know, God cannot exist in that place. You know, I think we have to start using that language as strong as it is, because we stand on the scriptures and we see what he says, you know, but for some reason we haven't lived this reality for a long time. So we're learning, and he says, you know, seek me and you will find me, you know. So for those who are seeking God in this moment, you know, he's going to lead us into this path and into knowing him into a fullness, and then we will begin to write these songs and tell these stories, you know, and tell the stories of Kina Mama Victor, and it will be okay. It will not be awkward for us to do that in the church, you know, because God is working in us a new generation, the underground church. So the church has to go under so that it can come up, you know. So I'm encouraged that God is still moving in the earth, you know, and he's stirring up hearts and he's pouring out his spirit, and we will see him just manifest himself soon, even in our songs and in our worship. Yeah.
Man, Carol, final word as you close for us the session.
Oh man, thank you everybody, and as always, Dannish, thank you for moderating for us, and you do a great job, and for carrying this heart of justice and doing so with such grace. So asante for the moderation, and for my friends, Leslie and Richie are part of the Msingi board. So they are part of Msingi even behind the scenes. So I honor your commitment and your time. And Moses, asante for even, I think we now know we are working together from now on, yeah. So, but my prayer for us as we close out is that we dare to sing new songs, that we dare to sing brave, new, complete songs, that we know that God is okay with pain and lament, and that there is no song that will catch God by surprise, but there are many songs that will make empires crumble. And so let these injustices, the role of the artist is to facilitate freedom. I really wish I had that gift. I really wish I had that songwriting skill. I really wish I could write a song, but that is not my gift. But it is your gift. It's the gift of the many who are here, who are songwriters. So to brave songs, to complete songs, to songs of freedom. And if it calls for us to move, to whip a few or throw down a few tables, we learn from the best. We learn from Jesus about turning tables in the temple. So yeah, asanteni sana, and see you next month. Msingi Talks is the Msingi Talks live is on every third Thursday of the month. We have the Msingi Talks podcast. It's already out. Our second episode is out. We have Pastor Linda sharing her journey, Pastor Linda Adolwa sharing her journey. And then please share this message with anyone and everybody whom you know would appreciate it, and join us and be part of our movement. So good night and see you next month.